Tonight, Canadian soldiers charged in a stunning anti-government terrorist plot. How police uncovered an alleged militia and the shocking allegations.
It was very serious and dangerous.
Is violent extremism on the rise in Canada?
It poses significant problems when it's in the military.
How a flying lesson took a deadly mid-air turn in Manitoba.
Devastated. It's really very personal.
Her daughter was beaten to death in broad daylight, why her sorrow has turned into anger.
I can't imagine the fear. I watch that fear every day.
A prime investigation against Amazon and the latest Canadian products Trump's tariffs are targeting. And an ancient catch spawning new discoveries.
I have a lot of pride and happiness to see this coming out.
What this armored fish fossil could tell us about the evolution of life.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. We begin with dramatic details about a thwarted plot to take over parts of Canada by the very individuals who are supposed to defend this country. The Mounties releasing these images today of a seizure earlier this year that includes 16 explosive devices, 83 firearms and accessories, 11,000 rounds of ammunition, and 130 magazines, plus military equipment they allege belong to an extremist anti-government militia, some of them belonging to the Canadian military. CTV's senior political correspondent Michael Couture on what we know and who's been charged.
Raphael Lagasse's friend is shocked the 25-year-old is accused of trying to form an anti-government militia. It's quite the contrary, actually. He's very pro-government, very pro-monarchy, says the friend who has known him for 12 years. However, the RCMP alleges Lagasse is part of a group that also took part in ambush and survival exercises as part of the militia training. The alleged plan was to forcibly take possession of land in the Quebec City area.
People were actually preparing, were taking actions that led us to believe that they wanted to actually achieve something and wanted to commit this violent terrorist acts.
Matthew Forbes faces charges related to possession of firearms. Marc-Auriel Chabot, Simon Anger Odette, and Raphael Lagasse are all facing charges related to facilitating terrorist activity. The military confirms Forbes and Chabot are active members of the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, police say one of the accused created and ran this Instagram account, which was a recruiting tool for new members of the militia. In addition to the dozens of guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition, a search in January of 2024 also found 4 pairs of night vision goggles, smoke bombs, and other military equipment.
This is probably amongst one of the largest disruptions and caches of equipment in any country around the world related to anti-government extremism.
Counterterrorism experts say the stockpiling of equipment indicates the plot was in the advanced stages.
As soon as they start talking about seizing land, this goes to me to, I think about some of the militias operating in the United States that set up strongholds, areas where the federal government can't go.
The 4 accused made a brief court appearance this afternoon in Quebec City, and all of them will remain in custody until their next court date, July 14th. Omar.
All right, Mike, thank you. Anti-government sentiment has been on the rise in Canada since the pandemic. And as CTV's Heather Wright tells us, that includes extremism within Canada's armed forces.
Violent anti-government extremism is on the rise right around the world. The plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol are among the examples. And now this. A plan to launch an anti-government militia in Canada, which comes as studies suggest extremism is lurking in the Canadian military.
I suspect it's not a lot different from the representation in the broader population, but it poses significant problems when it's in the military.
Barbara Perry, the director of the Center on Hate, Bias and Extremism, says anti-government groups often target soldiers as they are highly skilled and already trained. Perry says they exploit the fear and anxiety of both active members and veterans no longer serving.
They're looking for a place to belong now, right? They've had that structure that has been comfortable for them, and groups that are savvy will recreate themselves in a way that is appealing, that does have that discipline, that does have a ranked system.
In 2022, an advisory panel delivered a scathing report to the Ministry of Defense, warning hate crimes, extremist behaviors, and affiliations to white supremacy groups are growing at an alarming rate in both Canada and its defense team. It's an issue the military needs to address now, says former Canadian Major General David Fraser.
What more do we have to do that we haven't been doing for the last couple of years on behavioral, cultural changes? And what more can we do to ensure that we protect systems like weapon systems and everything else?
This incident comes just days after military police launched an investigation into a racist and misogynistic Facebook group, underlining the challenges the armed forces has when it comes to dealing with extreme views. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. There is heartbreak in Manitoba after a mid-air crash killed 2 student pilots. The flight school revealing today it's the first time that's happened in its half-century history. Here's CTV's Jeff Keel.
Smoke can be seen from a cattle farm where 2 planes collided, killing both pilots south of Steinbach in southern Manitoba.
Oh, it's devastated. It's really... It's very personal.
RCMP say around 8:45 Tuesday morning, they responded to a mid-air collision in the RM of Hanover. Emergency crews located the wreckage of 2 small single-engine aircraft.
The 2 pilots were pronounced deceased on scene. There were no passengers aboard.
The crash occurred near these buildings in this farmyard just south of Harves Air, a flight training school. Co-owner Adam Penner says the 2 pilots were learning to fly, one in a Cessna 152, the other in a Cessna 172. He says they were doing routine lessons when they collided on approach just short of the runway.
This is our everyday kind of routine. They're practicing their takeoffs and landings, perfecting them.
Penner says in the 50-year history of the family business, nothing like this has ever happened.
Well, it's very tough. It's just kind of a small family here. The students are often from overseas, so they're a close-knit group. The instructors and staff too.
RCMP could not provide details on the cause of the crash.
We heard a noise, sounded like an airplane revving its engine, at least that's what my wife says. And then the propeller being suddenly just kind of stopping, like a couple thuds, and then it stopped.
At the time of the collision, Nathaniel Plett was in his yard, which backs onto the property where the planes crashed.
We heard a bang, and then obviously they must have hit the ground. And then I went and looked. I said, Lucille, that must have been a plane crash. So I went and looked, and sure enough, saw the smoke coming up right away.
The Transportation Safety Board is investigating. It's deploying a team to the area to assess what happened. Jeff Keel, CTV News, near Steinbach, Manitoba.
And 1 person is dead, 5 others sent to hospital with serious injuries after a car flipped on its side and caught fire following a multi-vehicle crash in Toronto. It happened during rush hour on one of the busiest expressways, the Gardiner. At least 5 vehicles were involved in the collision. To Texas now, where more than 110 people are now confirmed dead from catastrophic flooding, and even more are missing. CTV's Adrian Gobriel with the new images and first-hand accounts of nature's unforgiving fury.
There's people in it. Oh my God, there's so many people in it.
This video from Camp La Junta shows a cabin ripped from its foundation, floating down the Guadalupe River. Attending the camp, brothers Braden and Brock Davis, who credit their counselors with saving their lives.
Our bed started tipping over, and we got to the top really quick.
With confirmation that more than 160 people are unaccounted for, the number of dead could more than double. After surveying the damage from above, the governor of Texas was asked if more could have been done to save lives.
We're going to address every aspect of this storm to make sure that we're going to have in place the systems that are needed to prevent deadly flooding events like this in the future.
Following federal cutbacks to the National Weather Service, questions about the level of coordination with local officials on the night of the disaster have largely gone unanswered. The NWS issued their first public warning at 1:14 a.m. on the 4th of July, the Kerr County Sheriff admitting that he wasn't aware of the fast-approaching surge until at least 3 hours later.
When I was first notified, it was around the 4 to 5 area. One of my sergeants was in dispatch when the first calls started coming in, the actual 911 calls come in.
though officials today declined to answer whether a local emergency manager notified authorities of the incoming wall of water.
We will get answers. Right now, all of our resources are focused to recovery.
The recovery will be slow and painful.
I want my world to know the Lord of love has come to me.
Campers sing this hymn on board an evacuation bus as some react to the devastation.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
These young girls were rescued from Camp Mystic, where more than 24 have been confirmed dead. As the chance of finding survivors fades with each passing hour, hope in Central Texas has turned to heartache. President Donald Trump confirming he will be traveling to survey the natural disaster zone this Friday. Omar.
All right, Adrian, thank you. U.S. President Donald Trump gave an unfiltered assessment of his frustration with Vladimir Putin today, using language some viewers may find offensive.
That was a war that should have never happened, and a lot of people are dying, and it should end. And I don't know, we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth.
Trump said he is not happy with the growing death toll from Russia's war with Ukraine and says that the U.S. will resume sending defensive weapons to Ukraine after halting shipments last week. The U.S. president is also ratcheting up the tariff war with a measure that could be another economic blow to Canada. Today, Donald Trump announced a 50% tariff on imported copper.
Today we're doing copper.
Copper and aluminum. What would that tariff be on? The sectional tariff?
I believe the tariff on copper, we're going to make it 50%.
Canada exports about $9 billion worth of copper and copper-based products, more than half of that going to the U.S. Trump says the new tariff is an effort to boost domestic production of the critical metal used in electric vehicles, military hardware, the power grid, and many consumer products. Trump did not say when the new tariff would take effect. And Trump is also floating the idea of a 200% tariff on imported pharmaceuticals, but also said he's willing to give drug makers a year to, quote, get their act together by bringing manufacturing to the U.S. Canada would be particularly hard hit, with more than 70% of pharmaceutical exports destined across the border. Swift public service reaction tonight to a story we brought you last night about a deadline to Cabinet to find massive cost savings by the end of the summer. Here's CTV's Rachel Aiello on what many are describing as a deepening sense of anxiety.
So the mood is, a little lower.
But it's the unknown.
Public servants are on edge, waiting to see how deep the federal government is willing to cut. All federal ministers are being asked to find billions of dollars in savings within their departments and agencies. By August, they need to be ready to present their plans to reduce operational spending by 7.5%, ahead of Prime Minister Mark Carney's first budget this fall.
I'm very concerned.
Today, unions that represent hundreds of thousands of public service workers were briefed by the government on what the spending review means for jobs.
It definitely feels like the public service workers are going to be bearing the brunt of this. It doesn't have to be a cuts to services and jobs. It could be doing the work smarter.
Some federal workers say the Liberals should trim management ranks, sell off real estate, and end the use of consultants to reduce costs. One union called Carney's proposal arbitrary austerity measures that are disconnected from the question of who is going to deliver on his promises to Canadians. The government says the intent is not to slash programs or services to fund Canada's new pledge to spend 5% of GDP on defense. But it remains to be seen whether Carney can keep that promise while also holding on to his commitment to keep the deficit in check.
Something's got to be done to square that circle.
We reached out to the Treasury Board president for an interview about what may or may not be on the chopping block as part of this expenditure review. He was not available. Omar?
All right, Rachel, thank you. Coming up, a grieving mother breaks her silence.
She reached out to me on Mother's Day crying. Like, I need you, Mom. I need help.
Anger and anguish and accusations. The system failed her murdered daughter. A BC mother is breaking her silence tonight about what she describes as a failed system after her daughter was allegedly murdered by a man who was convicted of uttering threats and choking that same day. She spoke to CTV's Shannon Patterson, and a warning: some of the details you are about to hear are disturbing.
32-year-old mother of two Bailey McCord had been estranged from her own mom for over a decade. But that changed in May as she was fighting a family court battle with her estranged husband, James Plover.
She reached out to me on Mother's Day crying, like, I need you, Mom. I need help. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody cares. Nobody's doing anything. I need you.
McCourt was in the process of moving into her mom's Kelowna home with her 9- and 3-year-old daughters last Friday when she learned Plover had been convicted of 4 counts of assault by choking and uttering threats in a domestic violence case.
They sent her the judgment that he was guilty on all counts, so she was happy.
That same afternoon, McCourt and a friend were beaten with a hammer in a Kelowna parking lot. After a brief pursuit, James Plover was arrested and charged with second-degree murder for allegedly killing his estranged wife.
When I read she was able to run and trip, I can't imagine the fear. I watched that fear every day. And falling to the ground and knowing that's it. That's it.
McCourt's mom doesn't understand how Plover wasn't held in custody after his convictions. She says Bailey had feared for her life for months, and the courts didn't protect her.
This is not the first time something like this has happened. It has happened way too many times.
It's absolutely sickening. Should never have happened. They were convicted of violent crime, not just charged and innocent until proven guilty. They were guilty. And this is absolutely horrific. It's unacceptable.
The BC Conservatives are calling for a coroner's inquest into the circumstances leading up to McCourt's murder.
It's just clear that there were so many gaps that ultimately led to this brutal murder that robbed a family of their loved one, robbed a community, robbed a person of their life. And I think as British Columbians, we can't let this just be another file that gets swept under the rug.
This is Bailey Teddy from when she was growing up.
Karen Fair also wants change as she mourns a daughter who was ripped from her life just months after re-entering it.
You know, I'm just going to spend my days just remembering who she was.
Shannon Patterson, CTV News.
Heartbreaking. Still ahead, why Amazon is under scrutiny just as its Prime Days kick off. As Amazon's Prime Days kick off, Canada's Competition Bureau has obtained a court order to investigate the online retailer's pricing policies and how they're impacting consumers. CTV's Judy Trin on the probe.
E-commerce giant Amazon controls 40% of the online marketplace. Now its business practices are under the microscope. Canada's Competition Bureau has been granted a federal court order to compel the company to hand over documents.
Those documents will give the Competition Bureau visibility into how Amazon operates and if there are any incriminating conversations or incriminating exchanges.
The Competition Bureau is investigating 3 questions. 1, does Amazon charge higher fees to sellers, forcing them to pass on costs to customers? Secondly, does it prevent sellers from offering lower prices on competing sites? And third, does its actions lessen competition overall in the marketplace?
This could lead to significant action, antitrust or anti-monopoly action against the company in future if it pans out.
This Canadian investigation comes at a time when Amazon is facing growing competition from Temu and Shein, online companies from China that have lower overhead costs. This year, it's expanding its Prime Day sales from 2 days to 4. There are concerns that Donald Trump's tariffs are turning away customers.
The response from Canada and Mexico to those tariffs is that where things are clearly American, consumers have responded by vetoing products.
In a statement, Amazon says it's focused on getting products to customers at low prices. Even if this investigation by the Competition Bureau results in charges, it will take years to resolve, a challenge that Amazon can weather. Last year, the company banked $638 billion in revenue. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. Coldplay played the first of 4 shows at Toronto's new Rogers Stadium last night and made light of the new venue's bumpy start.
And we'd like to say thank you so much for coming through all the bullshit you have to come through to this weird stadium in the middle of nowhere. So thank you for...
50,000 fans drove through traffic or took transit to the newly built stadium. Leaving the concert was more organized, but locals said their windows were shaking from the noise. Still ahead.
I have a lot of pride and happiness to see this coming out and being able to show that to people.
How this rare fossil find in Manitoba could shed more light on our evolution. The fresh discovery of an ancient fish fossil dating back almost 400 million years has reeled in researchers in Manitoba. Here's CTV's Alex Karpa on what the remains are revealing about our origins.
Right here we have what we call the skull roof.
This is the skull of a newly discovered fish that swam in Manitoba waters millions of years ago.
This right here is the articulation from the back of the head.
This ancient and armored fish is a type of placoderm. Before having bony skeletons like we as humans have today, these fish had bodies made of cartilage.
This big dermal head, so a big shield, head shield and shoulder shield, that was made of dermal bone. So bone started with as big armors.
This is the first discovery of this type of species in Manitoba made by Dr. Jobbins and her team along the east side of Lake Manitoba. She says these fossils provide new information on the early years of evolution.
They were also some of the first groups to actually evolve jaws. So we get to learn so much about them, about how we got teeth, how we got jaws, and so on.
This is what the placoderm fish looked like when it was swimming in Manitoba waters some 390 million years ago. Now, fossils of one of our oldest ancestors can be seen on display here at the University of Manitoba. Manitoba is well known for its fossil record. Dr. Kirsten Brink says Manitoba has some of the best preserved and exposed rocks around the world, which allows for these discoveries to happen.
A lot of the fossils we find in the province are actually due to mining. So mines that are actually scraping away all the rock to collect it, they'll uncover fossils kind of by accident.
Only this piece,
As for Jobbins, this discovery is one for the record books.
I have a lot of pride and happiness to see this coming out and being able to show that to people.
Jobbins now has no doubt more of these fossils will be unearthed in due time. Alex Karpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Fascinating glimpse into the past. That's a snapshot of this Tuesday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Good night and see you tomorrow.
Canada's #1 newscast for excellence in journalism.
We begin tonight with breaking news.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina, winner of the Canadian Screen Award for Best National Newscast. Watch weeknights at 11